everyone. I'm going to go over between now and Friday the rest of the notes for World War II so that next week we can get into the Cold War. So in your notes, we're looking at what's on page 72 and then 73 tomorrow, and then Friday, whatever I don't finish between now and then. So this one is focusing on what's happening on the war in Europe. A lot of these things we've talked about already, so some of this should be a review. There's a lot, and we don't really spend a whole lot of time going over the big battles and things like that. Again, we are looking at it from our perspective. We know that Europe has been in World War II since 1939, 1940, kind of depending on whose angle you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from countries that Germany has come and taken over, you could be talking about as early as 1936. So this kind of brushes over just the major details of World War II. If you're interested in this, then you might want to take Mr. Trogdon's war class to go a little bit more in depth than what we have time for, because again, we don't have but, I don't know, 6-7 weeks left in the semester, and we're just now in the early 1940s, so we still got several weeks and units to go through. So anyway, it talks about war plans. Roosevelt and Churchill, which actually become really good friends. They sit down and they decide that they want to have Germany and all Axis powers come up with and agree to an unconditional surrender, meaning they don't get a say in anything. They just agree that they were wrong, the war is over, they lose, and then the Allied powers are going to come in and pretty much tell them how it's going to go with the end of the war. So Germany is the top priority in Europe. Japan is the top priority, or only priority really, in the Pacific. They want an unconditional surrender. FDR will announce that at the Casablanca Conference in North Africa in 1942. Again, he is in his third term in office currently. We see the Battle of the Atlantic take place. We are going to use our convoy system, very similar to what we talked about during World War I. Our Liberty shipbuilding program is up and running. Again, we're not making cruise ships, we're making battleships. We do have submarines that are going to be used. There is actually a very sizable ship graveyard off the coast of North Carolina. You can actually go and you can scuba dive down and see a lot of the wrecked ships. There are a lot of German U-boats down there, as well as American cargo ships, etc. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, all right, so we know that the Allies are going to start bombing, and we're going to start with what we call total war. And it might be what you've talked about way back when you talked about the Civil War, how you were talking about war of attrition, that you're just trying to inflict as much as many casualties and as much damage on your opponent or enemy as possible. So we are attacking by day, the British are attacking by night. I mean, we're pretty much trying to take out all their resources. If you have no more resources, then you can no longer wage war. So we're trying to take out all of their factories and industries, trying to bomb everything that could be wartime production related. So we're trying to take that out with the new strategy of total war. We do have some major war plans coming up as far as Operation Overlord, which most people know as D-Day. All right, so we know airplanes are going to be used a lot during World War II. They have definitely stepped up their game technology-wise. We've got our B-29 bombers. We've got our small and big airplanes we're using. And forgive me, I don't really know the names of all of them. And if you ever get a chance, if you have the opportunity and you enjoy reading, not only is Ava's book good, the one that I talked to you about the Holocaust, but also Unbroken, which I know there is a movie. There's a part 1 and part 2. I didn't care for the movie just because it didn't do it justice to what the book is. The book is amazing. It pertains to somebody, Louis Zamperini, who actually was in Europe in 1936 for the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, and had the opportunity to see what all was happening in Europe before anybody really knew what was about to go down. And then he ends up coming back to the United States and is drafted. No, maybe he's not drafted. Maybe he enlists. I can't remember. I know his older brother volunteers and enlists, and I think he ends up enlisting as well. And it gets shot down over the Pacific. He's out in the Pacific floating around in a floatable tube with him and 2 other crew members for like 36 days. It's insane. And then ends up being captured because they float up on a Japanese occupied island. He's in a not concentration camp, a prisoner of war camp. It is insane. The torture, the mental torture he goes through is pretty incredible. The book is 10 times better, but if you want to watch a movie, watch Unbroken. I haven't seen the second one to it. The second one's kind of like his second half of life after he's recovered. But anyway, the first one's really good. And if you're interested in wanting to know more or see a visual on D-Day, what happens June 6, 1944, Saving Private Ryan's another one, is a very violent movie, so just FYI on that one. But anyway, so we continue our bombing strategy. We are waging a war on 2 fronts. The Soviet Union is pushing really hard to hold up what's happening on the Eastern Front. They're wanting the Allies to push on the Western Front. Again, that limits the number of soldiers and supplies. The Axis powers are having to split everything up. The only problem with what's happening on the Eastern Front is that the Soviet Union is not as well supplied and trained, and we know that Germany actually surrounds the city of Stalingrad. We talked the other day about how they actually make it to the gates of Moscow, which is crazy because if you get the capital, it's almost like game over. So that was a very scary situation for the Allies. They had already lost France. France surrendered in June of 1940, and to lose another ally would be catastrophic for the Allies during World War II. So a lot of initial victories, huge casualties on both sides. Stalin doesn't really care. Stalin, kind of comparing him to several other dictators that we've talked about throughout history, just kind of sees his soldiers as just things that can be used for whatever. We know that 500,000 casualties happen on both sides. The Germans do surround the city of Stalingrad in 1942. This is seen as the turning point of the war in Europe in favor of the Allies, because after the Germans lose at Stalingrad, now the Germans are on retreat. They're on the defensive, so that's good for the Allies. February of 43, the Germans surrender 90,000 troops. Stalin still wants to keep the forces divided. Here's another thing that we end up doing. We don't fight just in Europe. We fight in the Pacific, the Atlantic. We are fighting in Northern Africa. And I wish I could show you a visual, a picture for this, because it would really help. But anyway, so Northern Africa, we have Italian and German forces that are there, and they're trying to watch everything from the Mediterranean all the way up into Italy, what they call the soft underbelly. They're referring to Italy as the soft underbelly of Europe, and surround it pretty much all the way around, because they've got the Atlantic and, again, the Mediterranean all the way up in through Italy. So one of the German forces